Hi and welcome. This is Janet Allison of Boys Alive, and this is Boy Talk. And I'm so happy to have my friend, my virtual friend and guest today is Jennifer Fink. And she is, most importantly, the mom of 4 boys, and she's going to have some great things to share with us today. And she also has buildingboys.net, and she's just been a boy fanatic for a long time. Jennifer, welcome.
Hi, Janet. Thanks for having me.
So good to have you. And, we talked about, are we doing this video? Are we doing this audio? And I love you so much. It's like, hey, this is what I got. This is real. Here we are today.
Yeah, you get what you see. So if anybody's curious about the look, this is the look that you tend to rock when you, have 4 boys, work from home, and you're planning on going to the gym tonight anyway, so really why bother doing it up during the day? So it's workout clothes, ta-da, and yeah, hair back and headband.
Awesome.
Ta-da.
Yeah. So Jennifer, we of course, we're famous for our webinar that we did not too long ago, Help My Son Hates School, but this day is all about tweens, and I know you're an expert because you've lived through it. But there's some moms and dads out there asking the questions of what is going on. I don't know. He's starting to be moody, and I thought this would make a great subject for Boy Talk. And I just know you can really get us down to the practical, everyday, this is what's happening, boots on the ground, and here's what we're going to do. So I'm going to really, turn this over to you in a big way. And because everybody knows I didn't raise boys, I raised those girls, and we did through the developmental phases, but they were a little bit different. So I just defer to you as the expert. And let's start out with just talking about, how do you know it's coming? What's the scenario? What are the clues that you are entering tweenhood? And I do want to say, I don't know what the official.
So I actually looked this up. I was curious about this, awesome. And I found, I'm going to pull this up. I wrote a post in 2009. So this is quite a few years ago already. And so somebody else I'd followed at that point did a post about tween boys. And what she noted was that there was a lot more attention on tween girls than tween boys. That if you looked up tween girls, there was millions of information, hits. If you looked up tween boys, it was less than that. And as I dug further, I found out that really the term tween is a term that was made up by marketers to attempt to reach this like 11 to 14 demographic. And at that time, so 2009, one of the things that the marketers and the TV programmers were realizing was that there was a lot of programming aimed at tween girls, but what about the tween boys? And so anybody who was parenting kids then and is doing so now may have realized that a shift has happened since then, where now there's more tween programming aimed at the boys, and it's everything with, which kind of shows the Disney Channel puts on and which movies are put out and how they're marketing to the kids. And my thinking at that point in time was, wow, really keep in mind that this tween thing is more defined by marketing and society than biology. And one of the things I wrote then was, certainly a 14-year-old or an 11-year-old, they're going to have different needs and interests and issues than, say, a 16-year-old or a 4-year-old. But I prefer to look at this on the whole spectrum. So when we're talking about tweens, I sort of think of kids that are on this edge of, they're not little kids anymore, but they're not quite hitting puberty yet. And what's interesting with boys, and maybe particularly challenging for parents that don't have all boys, but perhaps had a daughter first, is generally speaking, boys develop on a slower trajectory than girls. So the physical part of puberty comes later, which a lot of parents, I think, of boys kind of consider that a blessing, that they're not dealing with puberty in, an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old. But the cognitive part and the psychological part is a little slower to happen too. So if you've parented a girl first and you know what to expect from a 12-year-old girl, your 12-year-old boy is going to be a very different animal.
Totally. I appreciate your perspective on that. I didn't actually know that about the marketing piece. So that's really helpful to hear that, and how much of our lives are driven by marketers. But I really think of it as age 10 to about age 12, because then they're teens when they're 13. And as you said, it's totally different for every kid. It's going to look different. So
and what's interesting for me is going off of that totally different. So we can say this is generally true, and we can say that is generally the tween age and stage, and every kid is going to hit it somewhat differently. The nice thing about having 4 kids is I got 4 go-rounds at this. So with my oldest son, I was clueless. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what that would look like. And I was, well in underwater before I had any idea what was going on. By boys 3 and 4, I started having more of a clue. And things that I would notice is the moodiness, that you've heard some parents say. Tweens are similar to toddlers in that, how toddlers, some days they want to be the baby and other days they want to be the big kid. Tweens are kind of drawn between, some days they want to be that little kid and they care very much about pleasing their parent and living up to our expectations. And other times that teen part is coming and it's almost like they're rebelling against us for what seems like no reason. It seems like we are handling things the way we always have, but the response is completely different.
Fascinating. So moodiness is kind of what you noticed first.
Moodiness. And another thing that I've noticed with my kids, and I've not done enough of a study to exactly check how prevalent this is, but as my kids start hitting that stage, especially at the older ends of it, so 12 pushing into 13 rather than say 10, it's like their internal clock shifts and they naturally start coming alive more in the evenings, and they're more prone to staying up late because that's when they're functioning well than in the morning.
Oh yeah, so then it's starting to drag them out of bed, right? And
as a parent, I found it challenging because what that's meant for me, my tweens and teens, they're more willing to engage after about 9 o'clock at night. And as a busy mom, sometimes I just want everybody to go away at about 9 o'clock at night. So it's a bit of a challenge to figure out how to make that work for the family.
Absolutely. Yeah. So talk a little bit about just like, what is life? What is day-to-day life like? What's your grocery bill and what are you feeding these kids? Because they are in some seriously major growth spurts at this time. And
that is another one we should mention. Boys develop this suddenly insatiable appetite, and as an adult, as the parent, it seems to you like you are not even done cleaning up and putting away supper, and they're in the kitchen again looking for the next thing to eat, and they're genuinely hungry. And then you might hear them come down to the kitchen at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and they're looking for food again. And that's a definite shift, and that's one that parents will notice, and it's one that will hit you in the pocketbook. Let's see. My grocery bill, it's pretty hard to quantify because I end up running to the store to get what I need rather than doing my weekly planning. But easily I'm spending upwards of probably $400 a month. And we should put the caveat on there that I live in the Midwest, so cost of living is less than it is in some other places. And I share custody. I'm divorced, and my boys spend about half of their time at their dad's house, too. So he's probably spending equal to what I am. Yeah. My kids, they don't have the healthiest of taste, as many tweens do, right? So many of them, they want candy, they want chips, and that's what they like to have in the house. Some things that I've found that really helps keep them fueled up and kind of satisfies their hunger and their need for snackiness. My kids love peanuts in the shell.
Ah.
Yes, that gets a little bit messy sometimes. No, they don't always throw away the stuff, but that's something that they just love, and they'll eat a ton of that. I keep tortilla chips in the house, like the bags of tortilla chips and shredded cheese, and they make nachos all the time for snacks. Popcorn is another big one, like regular, the popcorn that you actually pop. I have an air popper that's extremely easy to use. They go through a lot of that as well. Yogurt is another popular one. PB&J, gotta have that in the house. And hard-boiled eggs. My 11-year-old loves hard-boiled eggs.
Oh, wow. That's kind of different. That's great.
Oh,
good
right?
Yeah.
All of my other kids hated them, won't even eat Easter eggs. They like to dye them, but they won't eat them. But the 11-year-old loves them. So I will do up a dozen eggs, and he will eat them for snacks and breakfast.
Nice. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about, they want to get up later, their body clocks have changed. And what about like their, their friendships, their interests, what they, has it shifted, like what they want to do? And I'm guessing in there is some autonomy and some independence, and talk about that a little bit.
That's a huge shift that you start seeing around this age. They are at the point where their friends start becoming more important than their family. And as a parent, especially if this is your first, go through, that can feel very alienating. It can feel strange. It can feel sad, and it can be hard to let go. But as you said, this is a lot of developing autonomy. This is the first step in our kids really beginning to separate from us and develop a little bit more of their own identity and have things that are theirs in the world. So an example of this that just happened on this weekend. In my community, one of the things the PTA does as a fundraiser is they do this lip sync. And the kids do lip sync acts, and it is so well attended. It's pretty much, elementary and middle school kids doing this. And it's silly, but it's just great fun, and the auditorium is packed. My 11-year-old said, "Mom, I want to go." Okay, fine, I'll take you. And then he said, "I'm probably not going to sit with you." Okay, that's fine. That's fine by me. I don't care. I've been to these things before. I put a book in my purse. I had because you have to get there early. Mind you have to get there at least a half an hour early if you want to see. I'll read my book. I'm perfectly happy. Then my friend Mike said he was going to come with us, which was fine. And my 11-year-old said, "I'm so glad Mike came. I was feeling bad about leaving you alone."
Oh, aww.
And so we got there. Yes, we got there, and he was clearly scouting out to see where his friends were. He found a friend who was about 2 rows up from us. Those two decided to sit, in the front so they could better cheer for their friends and harass their friends as necessary. And at intermission, I saw these guys and their whole gaggle of friends out in the hall. And then I saw the group of 5th grade girls that were hanging around also. And then I suddenly remembered, I could tell you right now who I had a crush on in 5th grade. And it just helped me reflect on, this might seem like a silly event to me as an adult, but this is a huge social event for these kids right now. So I let my son have his space. He hung out with his friends. That said, I also kept an eye on him, and when during the second act he was getting obnoxious and loud and disruptive during some of the acts, you can bet that I excused myself, stepped over the 2 ladies next to me, tapped him on the shoulder and said, "If I hear you again, you're sitting right next to me." And then he behaved.
And I think that's such a good message of, this is kind of the holding that we have to do. I mean, we've held them in their,
Mm-hmm.
first, second, third grade. And now it's like, okay, we can open up a little bit, but we better still be there. And I think that that's a good message for parents too. I had a friend tell me early on, when my girls were, going into high school, she said, they are going to need you more than they ever did, but it's going to look different. And so this is kind of
it really does
place where it starts to look different, but you still have to, have your presence, be ready to tap them on the shoulder and say,
mm-hmm.
coming back to me. Or even like as teens, I heard the other day that you need to be a parent like a potted plant in their teens. So you're there, you're steady, you're not going anywhere. They know you're there, but you're letting them have more space and operating room.
I read that potted plant idea somewhere too. I think that was on an article that was going around, and I didn't have a name for it, but I have found that strategy so incredibly helpful for parenting tweens and teens, especially when we're talking about tween boys. As you know, but maybe not all parents do, they develop more slowly. They develop their executive function more slowly than girls do. Their verbal ability is, certainly not the same as their adult mother's verbal ability. And that's typically not how they interact with the world. So if you're a parent and you're hoping that your tween is going to talk to you about how his day went when he came home, it's likely not going to happen, right? So one of the things that I found really useful for staying connected with my kids as they go through this is I just kind of make it a point to be there, to be around. So how when kids are very little, they do this parallel play where you may have two toddlers in the same room and they're both playing, but they're not really interacting with one another. I do that with my tweens. So if one of them is on the computer, which we have in the corner of the dining room, I may very well be folding laundry at my dining room table. So we're not directly interacting, but the possibility of interaction is there. So often they're watching YouTube videos and I might comment on something they're watching, or they might comment, and then that might lead to watching some YouTube videos together. And if you want to understand what's important to your kids, I think that's the kind of thing you have to do, is be there to sort of be available.
Yeah, be available at unusual times,
Yep.
Late night and in front of the refrigerator. I love that idea that, he's working on his computer and you're close by just doing something and being there, I think is really
mm-hmm.
Do you feel like his connection to their dad is different now? Are they wanting more time with him? And I don't know, we don't have to go into all the relationships,
sure.
But is there a sense of him moving maybe away from the female, the mom, and seeking out, maybe it's a coach or a mentor or a male teacher? Is there more of like this view towards what men are doing?
That is an excellent question. And yes, absolutely. Around 10, 11, dads become so important to boys. So if dad is available in any form in your child's life, I do whatever you can to facilitate that relationship. So I'm fortunate in that, we have a pretty amicable co-parenting relationship, and we live close by, and the kids already spend a lot of time with him. And I'm certainly able to facilitate if, something else comes up and he's available and he says, hey, can we do this? Absolutely. Tonight, the kids are officially with me, but they're actually going to do Easter dinner with their dad and his side of the family. Perfect.
Yeah.
If dad is not as involved, I still say do whatever you can to support that. And I'm talking even if that means taking your kid to see his dad in jail, or putting aside whatever hurt you have about how he treated you and facilitating a meeting. I have heard again and again from moms that have been through this and adults that went through this when they're kids, the kids need to have that contact so they can start understanding that relationship. And boys around 11 are very much looking to the world of men for guidance in how to be a man.
Yeah.
So if you have uncles or grandparents or other, adult friends, neighbors, facilitate those relationships. And don't take it personally as a mother if your son opts to spend time doing something with the guys instead. That's just where he's at right now.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to facilitate that, as you said, absolutely. And the other piece of this, and this begins even way before the teens, is that, whatever you say about the kid's dad, and other men in general, what you say about them, what you communicate about other men in the world lands on your son as a commentary on them. And so as mom, as woman, you need to be so careful about what you say, and that you are uplifting the other males in your son's life in a strong way. And, save your complaints for your girlfriends. Do that outside of their range of hearing, because they're listening and they're soaking in, how does mom feel about my dad? And so I really appreciate that we really need to uplift men and facilitate, it's kind of this gesture of pushing your boy towards other men, because what's going to happen, and you're going to, it hurts your heart. You want to hang out with your kids. But if you can do it at this age, you're going to get a man back when he's in his 20s. He is going to come back to you. But if you never let him go, oh my goodness, he's going to be sleeping on your couch, and you don't want that. So go ahead.
The other thing that I think is so hard for so many of us as women and as moms is to let the guys be guys and be role models and parent and have input into shaping our sons in their own way. So I know this is something that I have struggled with, right? So many moms are like, well, yeah, but what if their dad, isn't a great guy? What if he has, sexist attitudes, and I don't want my son picking that up? And what if dad or the other men in his life have this real, macho idea of manhood, where a man never admits pain and that may be true. And it can be really, really hard to sit back. And I'm not saying that you don't need to say anything about that, but keep in mind that those men know what it is like to be a man in our society. As women, we don't. They have insight into what our boys are facing and will face that we don't. And there are some ways of being that may be helpful to them within that culture. And at the same time, remember, even though it might not seem like it when your son is a tween, and even less when he's a tween, he listens and he remembers the things that you tell him to. So it's okay if you and dad or you and the other guys aren't completely all on the same page in terms of, whether or not to say, be a man, or guys don't cry, or man up. That's okay. It's healthy to talk about those things with your son, but don't interfere or keep him from the men in his life because you so want to control that message.
That is so profound, Jen. You're awesome. You're great.
Thank you.
Wow. And I know you're raising great men. We're not raising little boys. Our goal is to raise great men. And it's tough. And there is a lot of cultural, messages going on. And we could spend a whole nother hour getting into all of that, but we won't. We'll just wrap it up here, short and sweet and full of information, jam-packed, right down to the grocery list.
Indeed.
So, Any closing words? Any little
Yes.
quote?
Yes. So as a parent, I have to say that like 11 to 15 stage, honestly, it is my least favorite. Some parents love it. I am not one of them. It's very difficult to parent somebody when you don't know what to expect from them day to day. It's very difficult to parent somebody who won't tell you what's going on with them, so you can't figure out how to help them. Mood swings and explosions are simply not pleasant to deal with. But what you said about how they come back around, it was such a relief and so pleasant when my oldest son turned like 17 and 18. Hey, he's a decent human being again. And mind you, not that he wasn't. He was growing and he was a decent person at heart all along. But if you can keep in mind as you're going through this, that this is a stage, do what you need to do to take care of yourself, because this is not an easy thing. And just hold tight. You are going to see the results of that when they hit their later teen years and enter their 20s.
Aw, that makes me want to cry.
I actually cried this morning. I was watching a video of my oldest son, who's 19, and a performance he did last year, and it just kind of brought up all those feelings again.
Oh, thank you so much for being with us. I am just loving our continued conversations about these boys that we love and adore, along with our men, so much. So I'm Janet Allison. This is Boy Talk. Thanks for being here.
Bye. Thanks, Janet.
Let's see.